I never thought I'd be scared of my own voice. My name is Mara. I'm 27. And for 3 weeks every summer, my job is to sit alone in a wooden tower on top of a mountain in Oregon, watching for smoke. I like the silence. That's the truth. After my last relationship ended, I told myself I didn't need anyone. I took this job to prove it. Just me, the trees, and a radio that connects me to the ranger station at the bottom of the mountain. The cabin is small. 1 room, a cot, a stove, a desk with maps pinned to the wall, and the radio sitting by the window like it's part of the furniture. The nearest road is a 2-hour hike down a trail so steep you need both hands half the time. For the first 3 nights, everything was normal. I logged smoke reports. I ate canned food. I talked to myself sometimes, just to hear a voice that wasn't the wind. On the 4th night, I woke up to static. Not unusual. Radios do that up here. I reached over to adjust the dial, and that's when I heard it. A voice, calling in coordinates, asking for help. My voice. Not similar, not close. Mine. The exact way I say my call sign. The exact pause I always take before giving numbers. I sat there in the dark, staring at the radio, telling myself I was still half asleep. I hadn't transmitted anything. I hadn't left the cabin. I hadn't even gotten out of bed. But the voice kept going, calm and clear, giving a location 200 meters from where I was lying. 200 meters. That's nothing up here. That's close enough to see from my window if there were lights. There weren't. I sat up, radio in hand, and said the only thing I could think to say. Who is this? There was a pause. Then the voice, my voice, said something I never got to finish hearing. Because right then, the transmission cut to static and the cabin went completely silent. That silence was the first thing that scared me. Not the voice, the quiet after it. I told myself it was a fluke. A crossed frequency, maybe. Lookouts share airspace with all kinds of radio traffic, hunters, other stations, equipment nobody bothers to register. I wrote it in my log as unidentified transmission and went back to sleep. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I called down to the station, keeping my voice level, the way I'd been trained to. I asked if anyone else was on my frequency last night. The dispatcher, a guy named Holt, who'd worked this district for a decade, said no. Just me. My frequency, my call sign, nobody else assigned anywhere near my sector. I didn't tell him what I'd heard. I don't know why. Maybe because saying it out loud would make it real. That afternoon, doing my scan of the ridge with binoculars, I noticed something in the tree line that made me stop. A thin gray thread of smoke rising from somewhere below the ridge in the exact direction of those coordinates, 200 meters out. I checked my map. There was nothing there. No structure, no clearing, no trail marker. Just green, unbroken forest according to every map I had. I told myself it was a campfire. Hikers, maybe, off trail and careless during fire season, which would actually be a real problem I could report. I almost called it in as a hazard. My hand was on the radio. Then, at dusk, static again. And the voice, my voice, came through once more, softer this time, almost gentle. I'm still here, it said. Why won't you come find me? I turned off the radio, just switched it off, sat in the dark, and told myself that, whatever this was, it wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But I kept thinking about that smoke, that thread of gray, rising from a place that didn't exist. By the 5th night, I hadn't slept more than an hour at a stretch. I kept the radio off most of the time, only switching it on for scheduled check-ins. Every time I turned it back on, I braced myself. That night, the voice was waiting. You saw the smoke, it said. You know I'm close. I didn't answer. I just sat there with my hand hovering over the dial, my heart going so hard I could feel it in my ears. The cabin felt smaller than it ever had. Every creak of wood, every gust against the window sounded like footsteps. I decided I needed proof. Something to show the station that wasn't just my word. So the next morning, I hiked partway down toward those coordinates. Not all the way. I wasn't that reckless, but far enough to get a clear line of sight through a gap in the trees. What I saw stopped me cold. A cabin, Small, wooden, weathered, built almost exactly like mine. Same proportions, same slanted roof, same placement of the single window facing the ridge. Sitting in a clearing that, according to every map the Forest Service had ever given me, did not exist. No smoke this time, no sign of anyone. Just the structure, sitting there in dead silence, like it had always been there and I'd simply never looked hard enough. I didn't go closer. Every instinct I had told me not to. I hiked back, radioed the station, and this time I told Holt everything. The voice, the coordinates, the cabin. I expected him to tell me I was losing it from isolation. That happens up here sometimes. Lookouts start hearing things after enough weeks alone. Instead, there was a long pause. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Mara, we've been picking up bleed through on your frequency for 2 days. A second voice, same signature as yours. We thought it was equipment malfunction." It wasn't in my head. Something else could hear it too. Holt told me to sit tight, that he was sending a team up to check the coordinates. I spent the next 2 days barely sleeping, listening to that voice call to me through the static, softer and more insistent each time, always asking the same thing. "Why won't you come find me?" I never answered, and I never left my cabin. On what I think was the 7th night, I made a decision. I cut the power to the radio entirely. No transmissions in, none out. If someone, or something, wanted to keep talking to me, they'd be talking to nothing. I sat in the dark with a box of matches and my hand flares, ready to signal the old way, the way lookouts did before radios existed, if I needed help. For 2 days, I heard nothing. No voice, no static, just wind and my own breathing, and the terrible awareness that something out there had wanted me to walk toward it. And I hadn't. On the 9th day, a rescue team reached my cabin. I'd sent up smoke signals that morning, following protocol exactly the way I'd been trained, and they found me sitting on the front step, awake, alive, and in one piece. They also went to check the coordinates. I watched from a distance as 2 rangers hiked down toward that gap in the trees. I heard them on the radio, once it was back on, describing exactly what I'd seen. A cabin, weathered and small, sitting in a clearing that wasn't on any map. They went inside. They said it looked recently lived in. A cot, a stove, even a logbook, though the pages inside were blank. They marked the coordinates and told me they'd send a survey team back in 2 days to document it properly, maybe figure out who'd built it and why it had never been recorded. 2 days later, that team went back. There was nothing there. No cabin, no clearing, just unbroken forest, the way my map had always shown it. They searched for hours. No foundation, no disturbed earth, no sign a structure had ever stood in that spot. I asked Holt later if there was any explanation. Some old survey record, some abandoned structure nobody had properly logged. He didn't have one. Nobody did. It went into the incident report as unresolved, and as far as I know, it still is. I finished my 3 weeks. I signed off the mountain and told myself I'd never take a lookout posting again. But I still think about that voice sometimes. The way it sounded exactly like me, down to the pause before my call sign, the way I say numbers when I'm tired. I think about the cabin, built like a mirror of mine, sitting somewhere just out of sight. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind picks up outside my window, I still find myself listening for static. Not because I want to hear that voice again, because I need to know, for certain, that it isn't calling from somewhere closer this time. The man who rented the cabin before me left a note taped to the back of the door. It said, "If you hear children counting, don't count with them." I remember laughing when I read it. I figured it was some old joke, the kind cabin owners leave to scare off future renters. Maybe keep people from partying too loud out here. I was 38 years old, out in the Louisiana swamp for one weekend. Just me, my boat, and a cooler of bait. I didn't bring a gun. Didn't think I'd need one. The only thing I was hunting was catfish. The cabin sat on stilts over dark water, surrounded by cypress trees so thick they blotted out most of the sky. To get there, you had to cut the engine and drift the last stretch, weaving between roots that broke the surface like knuckles. It was quiet in a way that felt total. No cell signal, no other lights, except sometimes, far off, a flicker that might have been another cabin or might have been nothing. I'd come out here to get away from things, mostly my ex-wife's lawyer, who wouldn't stop calling about the house. One weekend where nobody could reach me. That's all I wanted. I fished until dark, tied my boat off at the dock, and went inside to sleep. That first note stayed folded in my back pocket. I kept thinking about it as I lay there in the dark, listening to the water lap against the stilts. Then, somewhere out past the tree line, so faint I almost mistook it for wind, I heard it. A child's voice, counting. 1, 2, 3. And beneath the cabin, the water hit the boat a little harder than it should have. I told myself it was a kid. Some family camping upriver, maybe? Sound carrying strange over water the way it does out here. Swamp acoustics play tricks on you. I'd heard guides talk about it before, how a voice from 2 miles off can sound like it's standing next to your ear. I almost believed that. Almost. The counting kept going. 4, 5, 6. Slow, even, like a game. And every time a number landed, I felt the boat knock against the dock below the floorboards. Not random, not the wind. In rhythm. As if something out in that water was pacing itself to match. I got up and checked the dock with my flashlight. Nothing there. Just my boat, tied off exactly where I'd left it, rocking a little harder than the still air explained. I went back inside and pulled the note out of my pocket. Read it again in the flashlight beam. If you hear children counting, don't count with them. I remember thinking, who wrote this? Was this a warning from someone who'd actually been out here, Beth? Or just some story passed cabin to cabin, renter to renter, growing stranger? Each time it got repeated? The counting stopped around what I guessed was 2 in the morning. I didn't sleep well after that, drifting in and out, telling myself it was over. By morning, I'd almost talked myself out of the whole thing. Told myself I'd let a dumb note and an empty swamp get in my head. I fished that whole day like nothing happened, caught a good haul, felt almost normal again by the time the sun started going down. Then, as I was cleaning fish at the dock, I noticed something. A thin line scratched into the wood railing, right at the spot where I'd tied off my boat. 6 small notches, cut clean and fresh. 6, the exact number I'd heard the voice reach before it stopped. I hadn't put them there. I didn't sleep that second night. I told myself I would. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 6 notches carved clean into the wood, and I kept my flashlight in my hand like it might actually be useful for something out here. Around midnight, the counting started again. 1, 2, 3. Same voice, same pace. But louder this time, close enough that I swore I could place a direction, somewhere just past the tree line, maybe 100 yards out. And with every number, the water under the cabin slammed harder against the stilts, like something heavy was closing the distance, 1 count at a time. I lay there rigid, telling myself not to move, not to make a sound. I focused on my breathing. I focused on anything except that voice. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember dreaming. What I remember is waking up with my throat raw, like I'd been talking, and the last number still sitting in my mouth. 9. I sat straight up, heart slamming, and the cabin was dead silent. No counting, no water hitting the stilts, just stillness, thick and wrong. I grabbed my flashlight and went straight for the dock. My boat was gone, not drifted, not loose. The rope had been cut clean, a straight slice through thick nylon that no branch or current does on its own. And the water level around the cabin had risen a foot higher than it should have been, lapping right up near the floorboards, even though there hadn't been a drop of rain. That's when I understood. I'd counted. In my sleep, without meaning to, I'd answered. I remembered the note. I remembered exactly what it said. I tore a strip of cloth from my shirt and packed it into my ears, tight enough that the world went muffled and far away. I didn't speak. I didn't hum. I didn't let a single sound leave my mouth for the rest of that night. No matter what I heard scraping along the stilts beneath me, no matter what pressed once, hard, against the cabin door. I found my flashlight and started signaling, long and short bursts out toward a flicker of light I'd seen across the water the first night. SOS, over and over. My hand shaking so bad I had to steady it with the other. I didn't stop until the sky started going gray. A fisherman spotted my signal a little after sunrise. He'd been running his lines early and caught the flash of my light through the cypress trees. He got me back to solid ground by mid-morning, and I told the local sheriff's office everything, even though I knew how it sounded. They didn't laugh at me, which surprised me. One of the older deputies just nodded slowly, like he'd heard some version of this before, and said they'd send someone out to look for my boat. They found it 2 days later, 5 kilometers from the cabin, tied off tight around the base of a cypress tree, in water so still it barely rippled. The rope wasn't the one I'd left with. It was thicker, older, like it had been there a long time. Cut into that rope, spaced evenly along its length, were notches. I counted them myself, standing on the deputy's boat, my hands cold despite the heat. 9. The exact number I'd woken up with in my throat. The last one I remembered answering before I stopped. Nobody could explain the notches, or the extra water level, or how a rope that old ended up holding my boat in a spot I'd never been. The sheriff's office wrote it up as vandalism, probably kids, and moved on. I don't fish alone anymore, and if I ever hear children counting from somewhere I can't see, I don't wait to find out how high they'll go. I just stop listening. The location app on my phone still showed me at the cabin. I was 10 kilometers away, running through the dark toward town, lungs burning. And according to my own phone, I hadn't moved an inch. My name's Aaron. I'm 31. 2 months ago, I won a free stay at a luxury mountain cabin through some contest I barely remembered entering. One of those social media giveaways you tap through half asleep. When they emailed to say I'd won, I figured it was the reset I needed. Work had been brutal. I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere I couldn't check my email every 5 minutes. The cabin was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over pine forest, a fireplace that lit with a tap on my phone, locks that opened automatically as I walked up the porch steps. Everything ran through one app: lights, heat, security, even the coffee maker. The host had messaged that it was, I saw, fully automated for your comfort. Satellite Wi-Fi was the only connection out here. No cell service for miles. I remember thinking how convenient that was, how modern. The first night was perfect. I fell asleep to the sound of wind in the trees, the cabin humming quietly around me, doing exactly what I'd asked it to. The second night was different. I woke up to the sound of every lock in the house engaging at once. A series of heavy clicks, one after another, moving room to room like something walking the perimeter. Then the lights went out, all of them, except one small red light, blinking steadily from the security camera mounted in the corner of the living room. It was pointed directly at me. I hadn't touched a single setting. I told myself it was a glitch. Smart homes are complicated systems, and complicated systems fail. Opened the app with shaking hands and tried the lights. Nothing happened. I tried the front door. Nothing. Just a small spinning icon that never resolved into anything. I sat on the couch in the dark, telling myself this was a Wi-Fi hiccup, nothing more, and that it would sort itself out by morning. It didn't. The next day, things kept happening that I couldn't explain away. The thermostat dropped to 50 degrees without me touching it, then climbed back to normal an hour later. The coffee maker turned on by itself at 3 a.m., loud enough to wake me. Small things. Things I could almost convince myself were normal malfunctions, the kind of first-week bugs any smart system might have. Then I noticed the camera. Every time I walked from the kitchen to the living room, the little lens in the corner turned to follow me. Not randomly. Smoothly, deliberately, like something behind it was paying close attention. I stood still in different corners of the room just to test it. Each time, after a pause of a few seconds, it adjusted. I told myself it was motion tracking, a feature, not a threat. That's what these systems do, right? Track motion for security. But security cameras don't usually feel like they're watching you specifically. This one did. That evening, I dug into the app's settings, looking for an explanation, some log of what was going on. Buried under account info, I found something that stopped me cold. The admin account. the one with full control over every lock, every camera, every light in this house, had been transferred to a new user 6 months ago. Not the name of the host who'd emailed me. Someone else entirely. I sat there staring at that screen for a long time, the cabin humming quietly around me. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I understood that whatever was happening here wasn't a glitch at all. I sat with my phone in my lap for a long time, staring at that unfamiliar admin name, trying to convince myself there was some innocent explanation. Maybe the host sold the property. Maybe it was a property management company. I tried every reasonable story I could think of, and none of them explained why the camera kept turning to follow me. That night, I decided I wasn't going to sleep. I sat in the dark living room with my back against the wall, watching that small red light blink steady in the corner, watching it pivot slowly whenever I shifted my weight. Around midnight, the front door locks engaged again. That same heavy series of clicks, room by room, like a countdown. Then a message popped up on my phone through the cabin's app. Not from the host, not from support, just a single line of text sent through the system itself. Enjoying your stay? I didn't answer. I didn't move for a long time. The cabin felt different after that. Not like a place I was staying, but like something I was inside of, something that had eyes. I tried the front door manually, dead-bolted, and the manual lever wouldn't budge, like it had been reinforced remotely. I tried the windows in the main living space. Same thing, locked tight, controlled by the same system that had turned against me. Then I remembered something from the welcome binder the host had left on the counter, a line about the basement, apologizing for the unfinished renovation area, asking guests not to worry about the disconnected utilities down there. Disconnected? Not smart. Not on the system. I found the basement door, an old wooden one, separate from the automated locks upstairs, and went down into the dark using my phone's flashlight. There was a small window near the ceiling, boarded loosely from the renovation work, no wiring anywhere near it. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped my phone twice. I grabbed a heavy cast iron pan from a box of old kitchen supplies stored down there and swung it into the window frame until the wood gave way. The glass cracked, then broke. I pulled myself through, tearing my sleeve, scraping my arm raw, and dropped into the cold night air outside. I didn't look back at the cabin. I just ran, following the direction where I remembered getting one bar of signal on my very first day, deeper into the trees. My phone's location still frozen, still showing me exactly where I'd escaped from. I ran for almost 2 hours before I hit a service road, and another 20 minutes before a truck finally stopped for me. I must have looked like something out of a nightmare. Torn sleeve, dried blood on my arm, no shoes on one foot. The driver didn't ask questions. He just got me to the nearest town and called the police for me. I told them everything. The locks, the camera, the admin account, the message. They pulled records on the cabin's smart system, and it took them almost a week to trace the account that had taken it over. When they finally did, the officer who called me sounded tired in a way that told me this was bigger than I'd imagined. The hijacked admin login wasn't just controlling my cabin. It was linked to dozens of other smart properties across the region. Different owners, different guests, all running through the same compromised system. I wasn't targeted. I wasn't chosen. I was just one of many people who'd walked into a beautiful, automated house and had no idea someone else already had the keys. The investigation is still open. They still don't know who was on the other end of that account or what they were actually doing with all that access, watching all those people in all those houses, night after night. I don't stay anywhere with a smart lock anymore. If a door needs an app to open it, I don't walk through it. And sometimes, late at night, I still open my location app out of habit, just to check. Part of me is always half afraid it'll still say I'm back at that cabin.